Everybody has a story, and I don't know what your story is. God does, you do. And the thing about our stories is sometimes we let them define us a bit too much. The guy's name was Paul, a.k.a. Saul. He was a Pharisee, a religious zealot, and he thought it was his job to actively stop the followers of Jesus, the people of the empty cross and the empty tomb, these followers of the way, who were making it very difficult for religious leaders and the Jewish people in general to keep following the God that they had known for thousands of years. Of course, he's the same God, but in Christ we have this new revelation and ultimately this new covenant that Jesus has paid the price for people's sins. Well, if you go around saying that and you disagree with it, you feel like it's your religious duty to stop the heresy. Paul and others saw this as heresy. They did not like what was being said about Jesus. They didn't like the claims that he was the Messiah. They didn't like most of what he taught, and they certainly didn't like the idea that he was somehow a sacrificial lamb for them. They didn't like it because everything they knew up to that point was, this is how we do it, baby. Old Testament style, Old Testament style. That's what we would call it, not what they would call it. They would just call it the right way. So when people of the way, followers of Jesus, come along, a guy like Paul, who is a genius when it comes to religious systems, would say that's not the right way, that's the wrong way, and it's my job, Paul would say, religiously, spiritually, to stop them from their heresy. This will please Yahweh. This is his thinking. And of course, he became well known for his downright murderous acts. He was all about taking and apprehending Christians, throwing them in jail, and finding some sort of a legal recourse to ultimately take them out. They were seen as a threat. He thought he was doing God a favor. So when you get to 1 Corinthians 15, and Paul is talking about the resurrection of Christ and how all these witnesses saw him, Paul realizes that now that he's a follower of Jesus, though he didn't see Jesus on the cross and he didn't see Jesus in the days following the empty tomb, he did see Jesus on the road to Emmaus. So he calls himself an apostle, not out of pride or arrogance, but really out of sheer humility, because he's remembering who he was. He's remembering what he did, and now here he's one of the followers. He actually switched teams. So when he says in 1 Corinthians 15:9, "For I am the least of the apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God," he says, listen, I was the opposite. I wasn't neutral. I was the bad guy when it comes to this. But then verse 10, "By the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect." So what Paul is saying is, I remember who I was. I remember what I did. And quite honestly, as I look at that and look at where God has me, it's a really switcheroo kind of a situation. And it's only by his grace that I can stand in this salvation. So what Paul is saying is what you and I say, as all of us have a story. We say, I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I'm see. This is the story of who we were, and now the story of who we are in Christ. If Paul can do it, so can we. And we don't do it by our own merit. We do it by understanding and proclaiming and living by his grace. That's revolutionary, and that's RadCast.